们是不是就借重大家的掌声，我们先来欢迎我们下午阶段的第一场的这个讲者，是由日本永续能源政策研究所的研究员克里斯蒂安·多特研究员上台来分享日本农业光电的社会技术发展现况。Okay, please welcome our speaker, Dr. Christian Doedt, to share his keynote speech. Welcome, 掌声欢迎。
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice introduction. My name is Christian Doedt. I'm a researcher at the Institute for Sustainable Energy Policies in Japan, and I'm also a doctoral student at the Nagoya University. And I'm originally from Germany, but I'm living now already for a couple of years in Japan. And I will talk today about one of the pioneers of agrivoltaics, and I will talk about the experience of 20 years of agrivoltaics in Japan, and I will focus on the socio-technical dynamics. Okay, and first of all, it's important to understand the context in which agrivoltaics is expanded. So I will first talk about the climate and geography. So Japan has very diverse climate conditions. So in the north, in Hokkaido, there are subarctic temperatures, but far south in Okinawa, close to Taiwan, it's subtropical. And same as Taiwan, Japan is very prone to natural disasters. And it's actually one of the countries that is most affected by climate change. And yeah, similar to Taiwan, there are typhoons, heavy rainfall, there are extreme heat and droughts. We have earthquakes and tsunamis. And all these natural disasters, of course, also impact the agriculture sector, but also the energy sector. And also same as Taiwan, there's a land scarcity in Japan. So only 34% of the land area in Japan is flat. And there's also not so much space for agriculture, so there's a lot of land use conflict. And many of these suitable flat areas for ground-mounted PV are already in use. Next, I want to talk a bit about the agriculture sector in Japan. So small-scale farmers cultivating crops are the backbone of the agriculture sector. So the average farm size is just 3 hectares. And if we take out Hokkaido, it's even just 2 hectares. And the main crop that is grown is rice. However, many of these small-scale farmers, they struggle to make a living. So almost 3/4 of the farmers make less than 3 million yen per year. And yeah, under these difficult circumstances, the number of farmers are also declining. So in Japan, every 5 years, there's an agricultural census. And we can see in these numbers from 2010 to 2020, so just in 10 years, there was a decline of around 33% of farmers. And the farmer population is also getting older. The average age of farmers are now 68 years, and only 19% of the farmers are under 60 years. And yeah, with all this taken into account, we can see also the decrease in the farmland and an increase of abundant farmland. And that's problematic because the food self-sufficiency rate is already low with just 38%. Looking at the energy sector, the energy transition is slowly moving forward. In 2023, there were already 25% of the total electricity generation produced by renewable energies, and 11% from solar PV. And the government aims to increase the renewable energy share further to 36 to 38% by 2030, including 14 to 16% of solar PV. But still, at the moment, fossil fuels dominate the share of the electricity production. So 66% of the production is by fossil fuels. The share of nuclear power is also increasing after it was completely shut down after the Fukushima nuclear disaster. And so there's a heavy reliance on imported fossil fuels. And there are some estimates that yearly spent money on that is 20 to 30 trillion Japanese yen. And there's a low energy self-sufficiency of just 12%. So in this context, agrivoltaics has a lot of potential. And the pioneer Nagashima Akira already understood that 20 years ago and introduced the term solar sharing. So that's a term for agrivoltaics in Japan. 20 years ago, built the first pilot project in Chiba, close to Tokyo, and released the patent. And so in the early 2000s, agrivoltaics slowly increased, but it really took off in the 2010s. There were some factors for that. For one, it was the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011, and there was awareness that we need more renewable energies, both from the public and from the government. And then there were some important policy introduction. One was the feed-in tariff introduction in 2012, and the other were directives that allowed agrivoltaics on all farmland in 2013. And I will talk about that in more detail in a minute. But yeah, after these changes, agrivoltaics really spread. Now there are projects in 46 out of 47 prefectures in Japan. There are more than 4,000 agrivoltaics projects as of March 2022. But even though agrivoltaics is also in Japan just a niche technology, and there are no specific statistics on the capacity of agrivoltaics, but there are statistics on the area that are used by agrivoltaics, and that's around 1,000 hectares. And with a rough estimate, we can see that agrivoltaics account just for around 1% of the total solar PV capacity. And the reason is, even though there are so many projects, more than 4,000 projects, the average size of agrivoltaics are very small. It's just 0.23 hectares. But the agrivoltaics projects are very diverse. So already over 120 different crops are cultivated in agrivoltaic setting. And as we can see in the statistics here, the vegetables are most often cultivated under the solar panels. But at the same time, it has to be said that 30% of the crops are also ornamental plants, so that are plants, for example, used for religious ritual that don't contribute, for example, to increasing the food security. And many farmers also change their crops when installing agrivoltaics. Around 3/4 of the farmers change their crops to adapt to their agrivoltaic system. And there's also a high conversion rate to more shade-tolerant crops. The government generally recognizes the potential of agrivoltaics, and in many of the key strategy papers of the national government, of the Ministry of Economy, of the Ministry of Agriculture, they write that agrivoltaics should be promoted further. And they say that agrivoltaics can help with the larger societal goals, like the regional decarbonization, the revitalization of rural areas, because agrivoltaics can bring more income to the rural areas and attract more people back to the rural areas, because there's a strong trend of depopulation. And of course, agrivoltaics can also help with increasing the food and energy security. and also with disaster resilience. Because in natural disasters, there's often power outages. So, for example, if there are some problems with centralized power plants, it can help to have many decentralized renewable energy projects, agrivoltaics projects in the communities that can provide electricity directly to the community. But even though the government recognized agrivoltaics, we can also see on this image on the right side, it's still just a very small part of the strategy, and there's a lack of a concrete vision for agrivoltaics, and there are also no numerical targets specifically for agrivoltaics. Next, I want to talk about the legal framework, because it's important to have a secure and stable environment for investors and potential agrivoltaics farmers. And the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery, they of course oversee the agriculture sector and also regulates the protection and management of farmland. And here the key law is the Agricultural Land Act, and this stipulates also the possibility of land use conversion to non-agricultural purposes. And in Japan, there are different classification of farmland, and there are different rules for this different farmland types. And as we can see here on the right side, ground-mounted PV is only allowed on the lower quality farmland, type 2 and type 3 farmland, but agrivoltaics is allowed on all types of farmland. But agrivoltaics, of course, are not allowed unconditionally on the farmlands. There are many regulations that need to be followed, and they are written down in the directives of the Ministry of Agriculture. The first directive is from 2013, and it's allowed agrivoltaics on farmland for up to 3 years. So there was a temporary land use conversion for 3 years, and the land use conversion just has to be done for the pillars of the mounting frame, so not for the whole area. And after these 3 years, there needs to be a re-permit. And the key requirements are that the mounting structure is only temporary and has to be easily removable. The shading rate must allow enough sunlight for plant growth. The minimum panel height was set for 2 meters. And the installment of agrivoltaics shouldn't disturb the surrounding areas. And then the most important and consequential requirement is that the reduction of yield must be under 20% compared to the average level of the surrounding farmland. But especially the short duration of the permit of 3 years was seen as problematic by many stakeholders. That's why there was a second directive in 2018 that allowed for permit of 10 years under certain conditions. And one was that the farmer has to show competence for agricultural practices, or if the agrivoltaics projects are built on devastated farmland or type 2 or type 3 farmland, so on the low quality farmlands. Then the third directive is from 2021, and that allowed some exemption of the requirements. One was because there was the introduction of vertical agrivoltaics. So, and with vertical agrivoltaics, of course, you don't need the 2 meter requirements. So that was waived, and this also shows that it's important to adapt the legal framework to the dynamics in the technological change too. And the second change was that there was no temporary land conversion and yield requirement necessary for agrivoltaics on devastated farmland. Then there are some very recent changes in the legal framework. One actually comes from the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, and they changed the Renewable Energy Special Measures Act. And now they allow that it's possible to temporarily suspend the feed-in tariff if the businesses violate certain laws and regulation. And this includes the violation against the Agricultural Land Act. Because until now, it was very hard to really punish bad practices, because these directives are actually not laws, but more guidelines, and it's very difficult to enforce them in a court, for example. But now with the changes in the feed-in tariff law, it's possible. And already in August 2024, 20 power generation businesses with a total of 342 agrivoltaics projects, their feed-in tariff was suspended, and that's a total capacity of 17.5 megawatt and monthly subsidies of 13 million yen. The reasons were, for one, that there was not proper agricultural production under agrivoltaic system, and the second reason is that the businesses did not obtain permits for land use conversion within the required 3 years period after receiving the feed-in tariff certificate. But here it's also important to say that the improper agricultural production is made only a very small percentage of this 342 cases. I think just around 15 cases. So most of the problems were with permits. And then in April 2024, there were also newer, stricter guidelines for the actual land use conversion permitting system. There was an increase of monitoring and documents that need to be submitted. And then the yield requirement was reinstated for projects on devastated land. And until now, only the local agricultural council, they had to approve and consult regarding the agrivoltaics projects. But now, if they are big projects, with a size of over 4 hectares, there needs also be a consultation with regional and prefectural agriculture committees. I think Japan's legal framework is already advanced, but there are still some policy barriers. And one thing in Japan is that they focus very much on avoiding and restricting bad agrivoltaics projects, but there are not really incentives for good agrivoltaics projects. And even now, there's also still a high uncertainty for farmers. There are different reasons for that. One is that at least one re-permit is necessary. So even if there's a 10-year permit, you need at least one re-permit. Then, as I said, the local agricultural council, they are in charge of the permitting. And the permitting process is very different in different parts of Japan. For example, in Chiba, where there are already many 600 projects, the agricultural council, they are aware of agrivoltaics, and the process is very smooth. But in other parts of Japan, where there are not so many projects yet, the local agricultural council, they might be not very aware and are skeptical about agrivoltaics. And then the yield requirement also leads to some uncertainty, because in Japan there's not much research on crop growth under solar panels in the Japanese conditions. So the farmers, they don't know if their crops can really achieve this 80% yield requirement. And many municipalities are also still skeptical about the impact of agrivoltaics. There was one survey in 2018 where 60% of the members of the Agricultural Council, so the members who decide if a project gets approved or not, think it's not possible to have proper agricultural production under solar panels, even though there's now already a lot of international research that shows that it is possible. But under these conditions, it's unlikely that they are supportive and provide incentives for agrivoltaics on a local level. And under these conditions, also many of the financial institutions are reluctant to provide loans because they fear that maybe a re-permit is denied. And I guess now they're also afraid that maybe the feed-in tariff will be suspended. Okay, then moving on to the next topic. So to advance new technology like agrivoltaics, it's first of all important to create knowledge and then share it. And in Japan, it was very much learning by doing. So farmers just built the project, and it has some positive aspects. There's the real impact visible without delay, but at the same time, of course, it's an expensive trial and error process, and you need some very progressive and motivated farmers to do that. And there's also no systematic analysis this way. That's a problem in Japan in general. There's a lack of academic research for agrivoltaics, so lack of researchers focusing specifically on agrivoltaics, and even the researchers that focus on agrivoltaics, they don't coordinate enough. And one problem is also that most of the research and the results, they stay in the academic circle, and they don't reach the practitioners and farmers. But it's changing a bit now. So there are now more and more agrivoltaics organizations that increasingly share their knowledge. They have, for example, webinars and conferences, and they organize field visits. So there's now more spread of knowledge. However, many of these events, the participants are more already interested in agrivoltaics, or also more from the energy sector and not so much from the farming sector. And also now some negative information on social media from the public emerge, and I will talk about that in a minute a bit more. Then let's see a bit the technological change of the last 20 years. In the first stage, it started very simple with a DIY design. So farmers just went to the home centers and got some very cheap pipes and tried to build the project by themselves. And the farmers were then the driving force. In the second stage, this changed. It moved to a more industrial design, which is, of course, also important because the projects in Japan have to withstand natural disasters. And in this stage, more the mounting frame manufacturers were involved in the technical design. And in this phase, there was also a slight shift from some stakeholders who focused more on electricity production rather than on the agriculture production. And then for the outlook, the next step might be the electrification of the agriculture sector, but yeah, this is still at a very early stage. Then the business landscape also follows a bit the same trend. At the beginning, it was mainly by the farmers, so they installed the agrivoltaics projects themselves. But after these policy changes with a very high feed-in tariff that allowed for experimentation and stable income and made the investment in agrivoltaics very attractive, it changed a bit. So first of all, the high feed-in tariff also led to a boom of ground-mounted solar PV, which filled up the suitable places very quickly. And then the power generation companies, they search for new areas to build their projects. So if we look now at the graph, we can see that the main installers of agrivoltaics are now the power companies and not the farmers anymore. And the time of the very generous feed-in tariff is also over. So the feed-in tariff is not such an economic incentive anymore. And as I said, many small-scale farmers are also now losing money with agriculture. So it's important to find new business models that are suitable also for the small-scale farmers who are, as I said, the backbone of the agriculture sector in Japan. For the expansion of agrivoltaics, also, of course, social acceptance is important. If the public doesn't agree, there's a lot of opposition that can slow down the expansion. And to understand the public opinion, I did an analysis of 21 months of Twitter data, because social media nowadays becomes more and more important for public opinion making and information sharing. And here we can see that luckily agrivoltaics is still seen very positively, especially if we compare to large-scale solar PV, and where 80 to 90% of the tweets are negative, whereas for agrivoltaics it's still 72% positive. But at the same time, there's also the trend that the negative comments about agrivoltaics are shared much more often. So it's important to avoid this shift to a negative narrative, as it already happened with large-scale solar PV. Lastly, I want to talk about the rural culture, because agrivoltaics projects, they are built in the rural area, of course. And here we can see that many farmers are risk averse. They are resistant to change, unwilling to try and accept new things. And many also can't do it because they are already, on average, 68 years old. Many don't have a successor, so they can't commit to these new technologies and for 20 years of proper agricultural continued farming. And then in Japan, the rural community is also close, so many farmers are reluctant to share their information about the activity, so that also makes it a bit difficult for researchers. And then there's a very strong attachment to own farmland. So many farmers are unwilling to rent the farmland to strangers. And often the farmland is rather abandoned. If the aging farmer retires without a successor, then, for example, renting or selling it. So there are many barriers to enter the agricultural sector, both for researchers and new actors. So to conclude, there's a lot of potential of agrivoltaics in Japan, and it's expanding in Japan, and it can play a very important role to solving the pressing societal problems in Japan, but still it's a niche technology, and to really scale up agrivoltaics in Japan, it's first of all important to have a clear vision specifically for agrivoltaics, so not just for solar PV, to reassure the relevant actors. The legal framework should also be reconsidered, and especially the good practices should be incentivized more. Research has to be advanced to reduce uncertainty and provide also the basic for scientific-based decision-making. New business models should be developed and then also supported by the legal framework. It's important to also share the positive narrative about agrivoltaics and explain, for example, also the difference of large-scale solar PV and agrivoltaics to the public. And to avoid this opposition that already happens against mega solar projects in Japan. And then lastly, it's important to attract more young farmers to, first of all, stop the decline of the agriculture sector, and at the same time also attract actors that are likely more open to take on new challenges such as agrivoltaics. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Christian Doedt. 再次的感谢这么精彩的一个演说。